My husband took over the restaurant reservation I made for my dad's celebration and brought his parents instead. He didn't even ask. He just sent a text at 4 p.m. on the day of the dinner. My family deserves it more. My CEO is in town, and I need this table to close a promotion. Your dad belongs at some cheap pub anyway. He'd be more comfortable there. I read the message twice. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. There was just a sudden, absolute stillness in my chest, like a heavy door slamming shut in an empty room. He wasn't asking for the reservation. He had already called the restaurant and changed the name on the booking. He thought he had won. He thought I would scramble to find a burger joint for my father while he wined and dined his boss at my expense. I replied with 6 words. My brother owns this place. He left me on red. He didn't believe me. He didn't listen. And that was the last mistake he would ever make as my husband. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Also, wishing you all a happy, healthy, and powerful 2026. Please show your support for the channel so we can keep bringing you these stories. I'd love to hear from you. My father, Brian, spent 40 years with grease, permanently etched into his fingerprints. He was a mechanic, the kind of man who could diagnose a dying transmission just by listening to the hum of the engine. He didn't have a portfolio or a LinkedIn profile. He had calloused hands, a shop that smelled like oil and peppermint, and a spine made of steel. He raised me alone after Mom left, working double shifts to make sure I had textbooks and braces. He never complained. He never asked for credit. He just did the work. Then there was Logan, my husband of 3 years. Logan didn't fix things, he sold them. He was a sales executive for a tech firm, but if you asked him, he was a visionary. He was obsessed with the optics of success. He ironed his jeans. He leased a car that cost more than my first year of college tuition just so he could park it in the front row. He treated life like a performance art piece where the audience was anyone he thought could give him a promotion. The contrast between the 2 men in my life wasn't just stark, it was violent. When my dad came over for dinner, he would scrub his hands with heavy-duty cleaner 3 times before touching anything in our pristine grayscale living room. He sat on the edge of the sofa, afraid to wrinkle the fabric. Logan would watch him with this tight, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a look of tolerance, the way you look at a stray dog someone else brought inside. Logan never said it to my face in the beginning, but I felt it. He looked down on my father. He looked down on the grease, the blue-collar accent, the way Dad would fix a leaky faucet instead of hiring a plumber. To Logan, my father represented everything he was terrified of becoming, invisible, and nothing represented visibility to Logan more than the gilded anchor. It sat on the Boston waterfront, a fortress of glass and mahogany. It wasn't just a steakhouse. It was a gatekeeper. You couldn't just book a table on an app. You had to know someone. There was a 6-month waiting list for the general public, but the real power players, the CEOs, the senators, the old money families, they walked right in. Logan was obsessed with it. He talked about the gilded anchor the way religious men talk about cathedrals. He checked their Instagram daily. He tried to network with junior managers just to get a foot in the door. To him, eating there wasn't about the food. It was about validation. It was proof that he had ascended, that he was part of the elite, that he wasn't just a salesman from the suburbs pretending to be a wolf of Wall Street. For my dad's 65th birthday, I wanted to give him something he would never buy for himself. I wanted him to be treated like a king. I wanted him to sit by the window, look out at the harbor, and eat a steak that cost more than a brake pad change. So, I secured a reservation. Logan didn't know how I did it. He just knew I had it. And from the moment I told him I had a table for 4 at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, I saw the hunger in his eyes. He didn't see a birthday celebration for a mechanic. He saw an asset. He saw an opportunity. And like everything else in my life, he decided it was too good to be wasted on my family. We lived in the guest house behind his parents' estate. On paper, it looked like generosity. Logan told everyone we were saving for a forever home by staying with Susan and Jeffrey. In reality, I wasn't a tenant. I was a live-in asset manager with a checkbook. The dynamic was subtle at first. A grocery run here, a utility bill there. But then came the renovation. 3 months ago, Logan walked into our small living room with a stack of contractor estimates. He threw them on the coffee table like he was dealing a winning hand of poker. "Mom wants to redo the master bath in the guest house," he said, loosening his tie. "Imported Italian tile, heated floors, a rainfall shower. It's going to look incredible." I looked at the total. $12,000. "That's nice for them," I said, going back to my laptop. "I hope they enjoy it." Logan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "No, we're paying for it. Or rather, you are. My bonus doesn't hit until next quarter, and the contractor needs the deposit now." I stopped typing. "Excuse me? It's an investment," he said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he used when explaining simple concepts to a child. "We live here rent-free. This increases the property value. It's equity. Besides, after everything my parents have done for you welcoming you in, looking past your background, it's the least you can do." There it was, the hook. For years, I had been wearing what I now call the survivor's invisible chain. When you grow up with a single parent, scraping by, patching holes in your clothes, and watching other families take vacations you can't afford, you develop a deep-seated belief that you are somehow less than. You believe that stability is a luxury you have to earn. Logan and his parents knew this. They sensed that insecurity like sharks smell blood in the water. They had convinced me that their acceptance was a gift I had to constantly repay. I wasn't just a wife. I was a charity case they had graciously allowed into their circle. Every time I paid a bill, every time I swallowed an insult, every time I wrote a check, I was paying my admission fee to a family that I thought was better than mine. I looked at Logan. I looked at the estimate. And I felt that familiar, heavy chain tugging at my throat. I didn't want to be the ungrateful girl from the broken home. I didn't want to be the leech. I wanted to be worthy. So, I wrote the check. $12,000 from my savings. Money I had earned managing supply chains, optimizing logistics, working 50-hour weeks. "Good girl," Logan said, snatching the check before the ink was dry. "Mom will be thrilled." He didn't say thank you. He just walked out. They started the renovations the next week. Susan came over every day to supervise, criticizing my housekeeping while workmen tore apart the bathroom I had paid for. She treated me like a squatter in my own home, even as my money paid for the marble she walked on. I realized then that the chain wasn't keeping me safe. It was strangling me. I had paid $12,000 for a golden cage, thinking it would buy me respect, but all it bought me was a heated floor I was barely allowed to stand on. The week of my father's 65th birthday, the tension in the house was physical. Logan was vibrating with anxiety. His CEO was flying in from New York on Saturday, the same day as my dad's dinner. Logan had been trying for weeks to secure a reservation at the Gilded Anchor, calling in favors, bribing assistants, refreshing the booking app until his thumbs were sore. Nothing. On Wednesday night, I came home to find him pacing the living room. He stopped when I walked in, his eyes narrowing. "You have a reservation," he said. It wasn't a question. I set my bag down. I saw the confirmation email on the iPad. 7 o'clock. Saturday. A prime waterfront table at the Gilded Anchor. He stepped closer, invading my space. "How did you get it? I've been trying for a month." "I have a contact," I said vaguely. "It's for my dad's birthday." "I told you this. Cancel it." The air left the room. "What?" "Cancel the birthday dinner. Or rather, transfer the reservation to me. I need that table. Emma. The CEO is expecting the best. If I take him to some second-tier steakhouse, I look weak. If I walk him into the Gilded Anchor at prime time, I look like a player. I get the promotion. We get the money." "No," I said. "It's my dad's 65th. This is special." Logan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "Special? Emma, be serious. Your dad is a mechanic. He drinks beer from a can. He doesn't know the difference between a dry-aged ribeye and a supermarket steak. He'll be uncomfortable there. He'll embarrass me just by existing in that space. He's my father, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I barely recognized. And he deserves one night where he isn't treated like he's invisible. He is invisible, Logan shouted. That's his lot in life. Don't drag me down with him. You give me that reservation code, or you can forget about me paying for anything around here next month. You want to play the independent woman? Fine. See how far you get without my family's support. I walked away. I locked the bedroom door. I didn't give him the code. But I underestimated him. I underestimated how low a desperate, status-obsessed man would go. While I was in the shower the next morning, he went into my phone. He found the confirmation. He forwarded it to himself. And then, he called the restaurant pretending to be me, changing the name on the reservation. I didn't find out until Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m, when that text message arrived. The one telling me my dad belonged at a cheap pub. He thought he had outsmarted me. He thought he had stolen the crown jewel of the weekend. He didn't know that he hadn't just stolen a table. He had walked directly into a trap that had been waiting for him for years. Saturday night arrived, wrapped in a cool Boston mist. I picked up my dad in my own car. He was wearing his one good suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for my mother's funeral 10 years ago. It was a little tight across the shoulders, but he had polished his shoes until they reflected the streetlights. He looked nervous. He looked proud. He looked like a man who was trying his best to fit into a world that had never made space for him. You sure about this, kiddo? He asked, as we pulled up to the valet stand. That place looks expensive. Maybe we should just grab a burger. No burgers tonight, Dad, I said, squeezing his hand. Tonight, you eat like a king. We walked into the Gilded Anchor. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and gold leaf. The air smelled of expensive perfume and aged beef. The maitre d' looked up, his face professional and impassive. Reservation for Emma, I said clearly. He tapped his screen, frowned, then tapped again. I see the reservation, ma'am. But it appears your party has already been seated. Table 4 by the water. I see, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. Thank you. I led my father into the main dining room. It was packed. The hum of conversation was low and refined. And there, in the prime corner booth overlooking the harbor, my booth sat Logan. He was laughing at something the CEO said, leaning in with that desperate, eager-to-please energy. Susan and Jeffrey were there too, drinking wine that I knew cost more than my dad's weekly paycheck. They looked comfortable. They looked entitled. Logan saw us first. His smile faltered, then hardened into a glare. He stood up and intercepted us before we could reach the table, blocking my path like a bouncer. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You stole my reservation, Logan," I said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I repurposed it," he corrected, glancing nervously back at his boss. "Look at your father, Emma. Look at his suit. He doesn't belong here. He looks like he's here to fix the plumbing, not eat the food. Take him to a diner where he'll be comfortable. Go." My father shrunk a little, his eyes dropping to the floor. "No," I said. "We're not going anywhere." Logan grabbed my arm. "You are making a scene. Leave now, or I swear to God, you won't have a home to go back to tonight." That was the moment. The breaking point. I pulled my arm free. I didn't look at Logan. I looked past him, toward the kitchen doors. I raised my hand, not in a wave, but in a signal. The double doors swung open. The dining room went silent. Christopher walked out. He wasn't wearing a server's uniform. He was wearing pristine chef's whites, his name embroidered on the chest. He didn't walk. He strode. The staff stopped what they were doing and stood at attention. The maitre d' bowed his head slightly. He walked straight past Logan without even looking at him. He walked right up to my father. "Happy birthday, Dad," Christopher said, his voice booming in the quiet room. He hugged him, ignoring the grease stains that might have been on Dad's hands, ignoring the cheap suit. Then he turned. Slowly. Deliberately. He looked at Logan, who was standing there with his mouth open, pale as a sheet. He looked at the CEO, who was staring in confusion. He looked at Susan and Jeffrey, who were frozen mid-sip. "I believe," Christopher said, his voice icy and loud, "that you are sitting at my father's table." For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the clinking of silverware from distant tables. The CEO, a man named Mr. Sterling, who was known for his ruthlessness in the boardroom, looked from Christopher to Logan, his eyebrows raised in silent interrogation. Logan blinked, his brain clearly misfiring as it tried to rewrite reality on the fly. He stood up, smoothing his jacket. A frantic plastic smile plastered on his face. "Christopher!" he exclaimed, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't know you were working tonight. Mr. Sterling, this is Emma's brother. We go way back. I planned this whole thing as a surprise." He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, begging me to play along. "Right, Em? A surprise for your dad?" "Cut the crap, Logan," Christopher said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The authority radiated off him like heat. Christopher snapped his fingers. A server appeared instantly, placing a silver tray on the table directly in front of the CEO. On it was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. "What is this?" Logan asked, his smile faltering. "The bill? We haven't even ordered." "Oh, this isn't for the food," Christopher said, his gaze fixed on Logan. "Sterling, my brother-in-law here, likes to play the part of the wealthy provider. He talks a big game about status and success. But the truth is, he's been financing his lifestyle and his parents' lifestyle on my sister's back for 3 years." Mr. Sterling picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "Italian marble tile. $4,000. Christopher recited from memory, his voice cutting through the air. "Heated flooring system. $3,000. Custom vanity and fixtures. $2,500. Monthly gratitude payments disguised as utility bills. $2,500. Christopher leaned in, placing his hands on the table. "Total stolen from my sister to renovate a house she doesn't own. $12,000. Paid in full by Emma. Balance remaining in Logan's bank account. 0. Susan gasped, clutching her pearls. Jeffrey looked down at his wine glass. Logan turned purple. This was the moment psychologists call a narcissistic injury. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a psychological annihilation. His entire identity, the successful executive, the provider, the man superior to the blue-collar trash, was being stripped away in front of the one person he needed to impress. He didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He exploded. "You set me up!" Logan screamed, slamming his hand on the table. The dining room went dead silent. "You planned this! You let me come here, you let me bring my boss, just to humiliate me?" He spun on me, his finger pointing in my face, shaking with rage. "You liar! You told me your brother was a cook. You hid this. You hid his money. You tricked me into looking stupid. I didn't hide anything." "Logan," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You never asked. You were too busy mocking my father's job to realize his son built an empire." "She's a fraud!" Logan yelled at the CEO, desperate to control the narrative. "She manipulated me. She let me pay for. She let me think." "She let you think you were a big man," Christopher finished for him. "But we all know who really paid for that suit you're wearing." Mr. Sterling set the paper down. He looked at Logan with an expression of pure, unfiltered disgust. It wasn't anger. It was the look one gives to something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "Logan," Mr. Sterling said quietly, "sit down. You're making a scene." "But sir, I said sit down." Logan collapsed into his chair, breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. The illusion was gone. The golden boy was gone. All that was left was a small, angry man sitting at a table he couldn't afford, surrounded by the people he had tried to erase. Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a finality that echoed louder than any shout. He didn't look at Logan. He looked at me, then at Christopher. "I apologize for the disturbance," he said, his voice clipped and professional. Then he turned his gaze to the man slumped in the chair beside him. "Logan, don't bother coming into the office on Monday. You are suspended indefinitely pending a full internal audit of your expenses. If you treat your family like this, I can only imagine what you're doing with my company's accounts." "But the promotion," Logan whispered, his voice small and broken. "The promotion is for a leader," Mr. Sterling said, walking away, "not a leech." Susan and Jeffrey sat in stunned silence, their wine glasses untouched. They looked at Logan, then at me, waiting for me to fix it, waiting for me to smooth things over, to pay the bill, to handle the mess like I always did. But the bank of Emma was closed. I took off my wedding ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a simple band Logan had bought during his lean years, promising to upgrade it later. He never did. I placed it on the silver tray, right on top of the itemized bill Christopher had printed. "Emma," Logan croaked, reaching for my hand. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I was under pressure." "You weren't under pressure, Logan. You were under the delusion that I was an accessory to your life instead of a partner." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only the clarity of a balance sheet that had finally been zeroed out. "The renovations," I said, pointing to the paper. "The tile, the heated floors, the vanity? Consider that my parting gift. That $12,000 is your severance package, because I'm taking the only asset that actually matters." I turned to my father. "Ready to eat, Dad?" "Starving," he said, standing tall. We didn't eat in the dining room. Christopher led us through the swinging doors, past the stunned kitchen staff, into his private chef's table in the back. It was warm. It smelled of rosemary and garlic. It was loud and messy and real. We ate steaks that melted like butter. We laughed until our sides hurt. My dad told stories about his shop, and for the first time in 3 years, nobody rolled their eyes. As I looked around the table at my brother and my father, I thought about Logan sitting alone in that cold, expensive dining room. There is a specific kind of poverty that has nothing to do with money. It is the poverty of the soul. Psychologists call it the delusion of the empty wallet, the belief that if you buy enough expensive things, you will become valuable. Logan wore a $1,000 suit, but inside, he was bankrupt. My father wore a $50 suit from a discount rack, but he was the richest man I knew. I had spent years trying to buy a seat at a table where I was never welcome. I didn't realize until tonight that I had been building my own table all along, and the view from here was perfect. If you've ever had to cut off someone who treated you like an option while demanding you treat them like a priority, share this story. You are not alone.